It is your weekly program that provides the platform for our people to share the social histories of their community. Hello and welcome, in fact, a very warm welcome to all of our viewers, especially those of you who are joining us on the World Wide Web. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. This is Mind Community. Thanks for joining us. Last week we concluded our journey in the parish of St. Lucy by looking at the community of Josie Hill. This week, our journey in the parish of St. Peter begins on its northwestern corner, on the bay at Six Mins, where two brothers, Frank and Carol, welcome us into their special place of memories. Frank begins by establishing the boundaries, and you will learn that Six Mins traditionally was essentially a main road with houses on both sides and a tenantry road with houses similarly placed.
Six Mins runs from the store, or rather from the corner by Retreat, before you got to the bridge, to where the mailbox is. There's a mailbox on the above side going across this main road. Six Mins runs to that point.
Six Mins is my hometown. I was born here. In fact, this very spot that we are now is my birthplace. So when people talk about Naval String buried, my Naval String was actually buried on this spot. I spent most of my life growing up here. All my primary school and secondary school days, I live here. And Six Mins is one of those communities that, well, first of all, it's based in fishing. It's a fishing community, it's a coastal community. And the name was reflective of the bay, because really on the map you will see Six Mins Bay and not Six Mins per se, right? Six Mins Bay.
Six Mins is more than the main road. Okay, Six Mins is also Six Mins Village, and there's also an area where you used to call the corn piece, which is to the back where you have the squatters now, that area.
So it's a coastal community based economic activity based in fishing. In recent times, we would have seen other economic activity in terms of shops, bars, and so on. And now we're having an influx of tourists and things coming into the area. Six Mins is one of those close-knit communities. When we were growing up in Six Mins, it was very close-knit. We had the influence of the churches, like all other communities in Barbados. We had the influence of the rum shops. And strange enough, the two of them used to go together. So you had, for example, the Pentecost Church was the main church in Six Mins. And that was run by a lady called Miss Ford, Pastor Ford, a very strong, dominant woman. She was like a mother or grandmother to the entire community of Six Mins. And she had that kind of respect. In those days, even men who were by the road drinking rum or at the shop drinking rum, you know, and Miss Ford passed, they would always stop. If they're using indecent language, they would pause, and when Miss Ford passed, they would then continue.
I remember, you know, these bicycle rims. A lot of us had these bicycle rims rollers, and one Saturday, a whole crowd of us rolling these bicycle rims going across Six Mins main road. Straight. She used to live at the farthest end of this road, but her kitchen window looked straight across Six Mins. And she saw us rolling these bicycle rims coming across, and she came out and stood up on the step. And when we got there, she said, "Carol, Frank, where you all going?" We had an answer. She said, "Back so." And we turned around. Now in the crowd, we had a cousin, Victor, and he, very full mouth, "Y'all turn back, y'all had to turn back, what you in the..." He said, "You, Victor, that's you, back so too." And he had to turn back too. But those were the days when anybody could grab you couldn't answer them back, you simply had to do what they said.
She commanded that kind of respect in the community. She was like a mother of this community, and she was the pastor of the Pentecost Church.
That's a fine example of the values that made us who we are today. These examples were to be found in almost every traditional Barbadian community. Now, speaking about positive influence, that leads us directly to the church and the role it played in the lives of the residents here in Six Mins, notably these two lads And as we do so, we in a sense celebrate Mrs. Ford.
When you talk about Six Mens, you have to mention a lady like her, because she had a great influence, and she was the person who ran that church. Going to Sunday school was a must. Miss Ford was the kind of pastor of that church. If she didn't see you at Sunday school 2 Sundays straight, she would come to your home and she would find out from your mother, or you know, why you was at Sunday school, why you missed Sunday school. And I've known of cases where mothers told her, well, you know, my son Sunday school shoes mash up, and she would go and buy a pair of shoes. That was the kind of woman that she was.
Many of us in our younger years, pre-teens and things, would have even learned the ABC at Sunday school. There was a lady called Miss Maskell. Her class was the very young ones. I remember seeing her with a little board with the ABC on it and number 1 to 10. And she got a stick, and she teaching the young ones the ABC and whatnot and so on. Yeah, very interesting lady.
Of course, there was times we had a lot of fun with the church too, because there was a time when they had we call it revival, when the people get the power. And that was a big thing for us, because we used to be at the windows and the doors looking in just to see these people jump in and the power. You know, and that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun for us, right? A lot of fun there.
But there was a fan, a ceiling fan, that was donated to that church by the guy who had the shop opposite, Darcy. I don't know if the fan is still there. But a lot of people don't know that that fan was donated by Darcy. A ceiling fan. Because it used to get hot in there, especially during revival time. Revival time was late July, early August, just before the excursion. And churches, people would come from other churches down here, and from 7 o'clock, the place would get hot. You had a guy, I ain't call his name, but they had a particular guy that would be in the church, and he would start off slow. Hallelujah, 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 and it would rise. And when he reached the highest, upside down we go on the floor. And that was theater, that was drama for us. Because we would be at the window and at the doors, peeping to see what happened down on the floor. And he would be down on the floor in this fit, carrying on. I have a cousin who, when this particular guy moved away from that particular activity, getting on that way, I have a cousin who joined that church, who took over apparently, and he started doing the same thing.
The same church, the big thing for that church was the excursion. We call the excursion what people call picnics, or you know, or bus ride nowadays, or bus crawl or whatever. But our excursion always used to go to King George V Park in St. Philip. And for some reason, we always want to go there. Every year you will hear the children at Sunday school, when the excursion time coming up, say they want to go to this other place or that other place, or we tired going to King George Park. But whenever we end up at King George Park, and we always enjoy our excursion at King George Park. You understand? King George Park was the place where we had a lot of fun, I think, for the excursion. So the excursion was a big thing. All through the year, you join Sunday school, you're working towards that excursion, looking for that excursion. The excursion, and then of course it was the harvest, church harvest, right? Where you had fruits and so on. And then after the harvest, there was a lady called Miss Hines. She used to bake the sweetest turnovers. Yeah, Cicely Hines was her name. And she lived right on the beach side, right on the beach side.
These are the objects and the articles that made our community so special. The experiences that came from being a part of something in that community. Later in the program, you will learn more about the beach side of Six Men. But what about community shops and places where the men would enjoy a libation?
Rum drinking? Oh boy, that's another story. The shops that we had in Six Men's.
Rum shops again was a big thing. And strange enough, at a certain point in time, these rum shops last for a certain period. But then, because the persons either went away or died or whatever, these rum shops went into non-existence, right? We had people like Darcy, of course, with the rum shop opposite the church.
And one of the things I remember with Darcy, Darcy was a very serious guy. And Darcy and this guy used to have the little tussles. They said that Darcy had a gun, but this other guy had the gun, meaning you call it gun, but he had a spear gun. So Darcy would go for his paca, and the guy would go for his spear gun. They said that once this guy went up in a tree in Haywoods to drop a piece of iron on Darcy's car when he passed. The situation between them was such that they never got along. Darcy eventually left and went to the States, and he died in the States some years after. One particular shop that stands out in my mind is Malvern. Malvern's shop was located not far away, just on the above side. She was a short, wiry figure, and the counter was high. So sometimes you just seeing from her shoulders up.
Malvern shop was a grocery shop as well. They sell what we call dry goods. People could go and buy their dry goods from there.
But one thing I remember of the shop was divided in two. On the southern side was an area where I couldn't go as a little boy. Me and my brother couldn't go. As a matter of fact, no children could go in that area. That was the area where the guys would hang and drink their liquor.
The bar now was a separate part of the shop. But I remember as a little boy, we go in the shop, we couldn't go in that section. That was the section for the big men. So the men were there talking, playing dominoes, playing cards, whatever, and drinking rum. But we only could peep in that area. Because I remember I had one of these swing doors like where you find in the Western movies, and the guys used to be behind there doing their thing.
You couldn't go in that area. You could go in the other area and buy your groceries, corned beef, whatever, but not in that area. Because if you go in that area at all, you end up with a slap or something. And that was the time when anybody could have corrected you and sent you home. Parents would have done nothing. You get another lashing. One of the last rum shops we had in Six Mines was Duty. That's her name, Duty. A nice old lady.
There was one shop at the corner of Six Mines that never used to sell alcohol. A lady called Miss Graham, right? She was Miss Graham or Miss Hines. She never used to sell alcohol.
Because of her Christian, right?
But that was a shop that sell, again, groceries and so on.
Dry goods like flour, sugar, some tin meats, salt meat, kerosene oil, and so on.
And I remember there was a guy called Stanley King, who used to live in Sherman's, which is neighboring village, Six Mines. And Stanley King's wife would send him there to buy sugar. And when he get the sugar, he would start eating sugar from the time he leave the shop to get home. So if he buy a pour of sugar, when he get home, a lot of that sugar that eat already. Right? I don't know the bar had to stay about eating sugar. And he always send him for the sugar. And he would buy the sugar and eat it all the way he get home. She was a nice lady, and I remember too she had a big ackee tree. And that again was an area where the guys would go and try to, well, we call it stealing. But in those days we didn't say it was stealing. You go and pick the ackee for permission. They put it that way. Right? But it's all part of fun of growing up in Six Mines.
But there was the shop over by the mailbox. Mrs. Gibbons. Mrs. Gibbons was married to my great uncle, Leon Gibbons. His nickname was Derry. And they said that she used to beat him. I don't know how true that is. That's before my time. But Miss Gibbons was a tall, strapping woman. And she had a strange habit. We would go there and buy sweets. If we couldn't call for a sweetie, she would correct you, say they're confectionaries. They're confectionaries. And when she got to give you back change, she used to wash the coins in the sink and give you back. I never knew why, but some people thought that she believed. People would buy small items from the shops in Six Mines. But usually, most people would shop at Elmer's supermarket.
Elmer's supermarket was a very popular one in Spikestown. Now, almost every community had at least one individual who specialized in baking. Last week we learned of Mrs. Leslie in Josie Hill. What about here in Six Min, those who baked and made those special delicacies?
We had individuals in the area who used to bake and sell bread, especially on Sundays. You had Miss Skeet. She was a member of the Six Men's Pentecostal Church. She used to bake turnovers and so on for the harvest. And after the harvest is over, they would sell the bread. But usually on Sundays, she would bake and guys would go across there and buy sweet bread, the coconut, or the turnovers. And there was another lady, Miss Eugene, who lived across by Retreat. We would go there and buy bread also. She used to do some baking also. And then you had some people who do black pudding and sauce. There was a lady in the back, don't remember her name, but she was a brooms. On Saturdays she would do her pudding and sauce and come down with a tray and put it on a step across the road, and people would come and buy their black pudding and sauce. That was the day when you had black pudding in the belly. I noticed that nowadays you don't put steam pudding in the belly anymore.
How times have changed. Sauce, however, remains a Saturday staple in Barbados. The important role of small-scale fishing in providing livelihoods and incomes for millions of people all around the world is celebrated annually on World Fisheries Day in November and on Fisherman's Day in June. Fishing is one of the activities that defines this community of Six Men. Carol and Frank celebrate the fisherfolks of this area.
My uncles, most of my family, male family from my mother's side were fishermen. My uncles, my great uncles. As a matter of fact, two of my uncles used to carry out a boat by the name called the Malvern. And their uncles used to carry out a sister boat called the Galanti. These boats were owned by a guy in Spikestown called Budgie. Budgie operated a mechanic shop there in Church Street.
So you know, anything you have with fishermen, they can be a lot of fun. And nearly all the fishermen had nicknames. Nicknames is a prevalent thing in Six Men as well. There are people who I would know by nicknames and I don't even remember their real names. You understand? We had fishermen down here. We had a guy, there's an older guy, he used to live in England, but he came back to Barbados and he bought fishing boats. He was a Jordan, but used to call him Doodoo, or the big fisherman. And he had two houses, one he was living in and one he was renting out. And he had fishing boat. In those days too, the guy used to do a lot of racing. The fishing boats, racing fishing boats was a big thing in Six Men as well. So he had his boat and they used to brag about, he used to brag about how fast his boat is. You understand? So they used to like bank holidays, boat racing, I mean fishing boat racing was a big thing. The guy used to race from the Six Men's jetty, which was the old jetty at Six Men's, where Nikki Beach is now, and race the Spikestown jetty and back. And that was a big thing. We, of course, as youngsters, used to clamor to get on the fast boat because we wanted to be on the boat that was going to be race. And it was a big, you know, that was a whole big thing in Six Men's, that fishing boat race. I remember as a boy growing up, we used to look forward to the fishing boats coming in. The thing about the fishing boats coming in on the evening, I ran all the way from Spikestown Boys School. You know, my brother and I and all the guys from Six Men's, we ran home during flying fish season just to get the Six Men's, just to get that fisherman grub.
Next door to us was a guy by the name of Hollery. He was a very good friend of ours, and we used to frequent his home. My brother, a cousin, and myself, we would go over there, and we used to look forward every evening to his grub. Because he used to, well, the others would bring their boats further across. He used to bring his boat right behind his house, which was next door to us. And we used to look forward to his grub. You know, so sometimes when he help him haul up the boat, you get a few flying fish, which you would roast.
So you leave your food home, your mother cook the food in the daytime, and you don't want that food, you know. You go out to the beach because you can go and help the fishermen offload the flying fish. They used to got these crates, we offload the flying fish, and then when they offload those flying fish, you go for the saucepan. And you get that fisherman grub. They used to got some tough dumplings. I remember the dumplings for sure. And that fisherman grub was the big thing. Or you get some flying fish and you roast them on the beach or you boil them. You used to put them in a saucepan with seawater and boil them, and then you could just skin off the jacket of the fish and eat that fish like that. And it used to taste really nice. And this is flying fish that wasn't seasoned up or anything like this. I believe the inside, the fish offal is what used to flavor that flying fish. But it used to taste really, really nice, you know. So growing up in Six Mines in those times were like, but that was the kind of life that you had, because the as I say, fishing was a big influence. And that fisherman grub, let me tell you, I've heard people talk all over Barbados that we have fishing villages. I hear people talk about that fisherman grub, and it was really a big thing.
We spoke about fishing. What about animal husbandry here in Six Mines?
One other thing that I must tell you too, all around this beach, we had people raising pigs. There were pig pens.
It's hard to believe now. Our house, for instance, right here our house was a pretty long house. And then you had a big yard. And then you had an area with pig pens. And then beach. And then the sea. If you look at this now, you can never imagine that you had that. The coconut tree there was actually in our yard. This coconut tree was right by the back gate. And then you had an area with pig pens behind it. And then you had beach. And then the sea.
Our great uncle, Edric Robinson, used to call him Fizzy. He had pig pens behind here because we raised up our aunt, our great aunt, right? And that was his sister. And he had the pig pens behind our house on the beach side. Of course, they had more land before you get into the sea. And those pig pens were on the beach side. If it was possible now to go in the surf, enter the surf and dig the sand, you will still find the flooring of those pig pens. Raising pigs on the beach side was a common thing. As a matter of fact, all kind of animals raised on the beach side as well.
Somewhat difficult to believe that was indeed the case, but it happened here in Six Mines. And interestingly enough, this is what these programs are all about, allowing you that opportunity to tell the stories of the changing landscapes of your communities. We have heard the stories of the manchineel trees and how we are to exercise caution when in close proximity. Many were planted here in this community, and strange enough, did you know of the nut of this tree?
Of course, there were one or two things that you had to be very careful of growing up in Six Mines. And one of the things that I could remember that I could tell you is the amount of manchineel trees on the beach side. I think right here behind us there's a manchineel tree. Right, we had all around this beach was full of manchineel trees. Of course, the manchineel berry carries a poisonous milk that if it gets into your eye, it could actually damage your eye, and it also used to blister your skin. The only part of your skin that this manchineel milk never could blister is the palm of your hands or the sole of your feet. But it will give you these blisters if it goes on your skin. And the strange thing is that we grew up, my brother and I grew up between these manchineel trees, and I never got blistered. I never got blistered. But later, when I was a teenager, I discovered from an old lady. There was an old lady who lived on a house on the beach side. Her name was Levine. And she taught us that these manchineel berries, when they got old, when they fell on the ground and they got dry, to the point where they had the prickles, you could actually crack the berry, and there were nuts inside that you could eat. But you had to know exactly when to eat these nuts. So we used to do that and eat the nuts. Yeah. One of my neighbors a guy called Radcliffe, right? He's part of the small family. And the small family is only small family by name, because it was a big family, right? Because they are brothers and sisters, but they live 2 houses away from us on the same beach right here. And he saw us eating these nuts, and he was a little younger than I am, and he went and he tried to eat some nuts too, but he picked the wrong berries. He picked the berries that wasn't fully ripe to the point where it was prickled. He picked those berries and ate the nuts, and it made him sick. You know, that was unfortunate. That was unfortunate.
Not a good experience, but it happened right here on the bay at 6 Men. Now, this program is not an implied endorsement of the eating of the nut of the manchineel tree. Please be very careful. Earlier in the program, you were told of the area on the western side where animals were kept. Today, it is a very different scene.
Now we see is right in because of the erosion.
This erosion would have started probably in the late 60s, early 70s. And I could only, well, this is something that me and my brother have spoken about several times, right? And we believe, I think he shares this view with me as well, that at the time we had the NCC people.
I could remember as a teenager, at that time it wasn't National Conservation Commission, it was the Parks and Beaches Commission. And they would come and they would, from way down Haywards,
were cleaning the beaches and so on, around that time. And as I said, there were a lot of manchineel trees. Now the manchineel trees have some very sturdy roots that used to hold the soil. Right. When the NCC people came and they were doing the cleaning, they would light fires to burn the garbage, and they light them onto the manchineel trees. So the manchineel trees caught fire and actually burned, and then they fell into the sea.
They destroyed all the manchineel trees.
So a lot of the manchineel trees across the beach, we lost like that.
Now there are only about 6 or so, if so many manchineel trees along this stretch.
The beach erosion started coming a lot more. People who would have been older than I am would make reference and say that when they built the Deepwater Harbour, it had an effect on the beach, this side. But I won't go into that part because, as I say, I am not really aware of that. My experience is that those manchineel trees, because I grew up down here and there was not a lot of beach erosion. As I said, we born and live on this beach. And the thing about it is that when they had rough seas, the sea never really came into our yard as such, right? Because, as I said, the manchineel trees, and then there were reef. The reefs ran all behind where our house was. So that would help break the sea from coming as far as well. But you used to have some big swells, and you would think that when you do those big swells would come right through your house because the house was that close to the beach. But actually they had enough distance, and the manchineel trees used to act as a buffer for these huge waves as well. As those trees died out, but they got killed off, right? Eventually the sand started to erode and the sea started to come in. So that's why now you have a serious beach erosion along 6 miles out.
And then they had to move the people from here in the early 80s and relocate them to the back in the area now where they call 6 Men's Development. Strange enough, that area is not even 6 Men's. That area is actually Colleton. All the area past the mailbox is Colleton. But because it's one long road, people usually refer to the whole stretch as 6 Men's. So actually the people who were moved from here were moved to Colleton, but then they renamed that area 6 Men's Development.
I hope you have enjoyed this just as the Gilts brothers enjoyed presenting it to you. We continue to provide that special space for our people to share the social history of their communities. Frank and Carol did just that. I have good news for you. I was successful in persuading the brothers to be back with us next week at the same time to continue that discussion about this, their beloved community, 6 Men. So until next week, I'm Sherwood McCaskey. It's goodbye for now.